Well, good morning, everyone. Welcome to Race Weekend. Thank you for being here and setting aside this time to be with the Lord and to be with your family. As you know, we've been doing a series on the Lord's Prayer. And what we've been doing throughout this series is we've kind of been taking one line at a time of the Lord's Prayer, one stanza, and we've been looking at each of these. And today we're going to take a look at Matthew 6:12. And Matthew 6:12 says this: "Forgive us our debts as we have also forgiven our..." What are you doing? That's my money. So rude. All right, let's try this again. Forgive us our debts as we have also... Clint, what are you doing here? What is it? Clint, that is uncalled for. I don't know. We don't do this in Brownsburg. One more time. Forgive us our debts as we have... Tina, what are you... Ow. That literally hurts. She made right in the ear. Is it just me, or has anyone else noticed that you're always being interrupted in life by rude people? By people who take things that belong to you, by people who call you names, and by people who hit you with big blow-up red boxing gloves. I mean, no matter where we turn in life, we're always being offended. Out in Brownsburg, we have this thing called Brownsburg Chatter. It's a Facebook page. There's about 8,000 people on it. And of those 8,000 people, at least 7,000 of them have at one time posted how mad they are because somebody violated the drive-through line rules at McDonald's. This is like a major issue in Brownsburg. If you are a resident of Brownsburg, you've been upset at one time or another at the McDonald's drive-through line. And I read all these posts and I think clearly God had something better in mind when he created social media. But that's what we use it for in Brownsburg. Rude people are everywhere. Offenses happen all the time. At work, you have workmates who are rude to you. You have competition there. You might have a boss who's critical of you, a boss who doesn't encourage you, a boss who might overlook your work and your effort. Some of the worst pains that we can experience in our lives are with our own family members, those who are closest to us, our children and parents and siblings, our spouses, who might let us down or say things that cut us at the core because we've allowed them to be so close. For those of us for whom church is part of our life, many of us have been hurt by leaders in the church. We've been hurt by brothers and sisters who we thought would treat us different. So we get hurt almost everywhere we go. And so forgiveness is this ongoing process. And as we look at the Lord's Prayer, it's important for us to understand the timeliness of the Lord's Prayer. And the Lord's Prayer was designed to be prayed on a daily basis. It was meant to be something that we don't just pray once a month. We don't just pray on January 1st for the upcoming year. The Lord's Prayer was meant to be prayed daily. And the reason it was meant to be prayed daily is because we need what the Lord's Prayer offers on a daily basis. The Lord's Prayer teaches us, in particular when it comes to forgiveness, that if we want to experience God's mercy on a daily basis, then we need to give mercy on a daily basis. We need to show other people mercy on a daily basis. We need to show grace and compassion on a daily basis. Today's message is actually a fairly simple one. It shouldn't be hard for you to follow. There's actually 2 points to today's message. And the first is this: why do we need mercy? Why do we so badly need the mercy of God? And the second point will be this: is why do we so badly need to show mercy to other people around us on a daily basis? Why do we need it, and why do we need to give it on a daily basis? Before we kind of get into that, though, it's really important for us to stop and say, how should I approach the Lord's Prayer? What is my mindset? What are my expectations? How do I need to prepare my mind and heart to really embrace this Lord's Prayer? And what's the posture that I need to take? And the answer to that question is that in order for us to really be able to pray the Lord's Prayer, to embrace it, for the Lord's Prayer to be what it needs to be in our life, we have to make sure that the posture that we take and the approach that we have to the Lord's Prayer is one of absolute and complete humility. The Lord's Prayer begins with this verse, Our Father, who art in heaven, hallowed be thy name. And from that very first line in the Lord's Prayer, we begin by expressing humility. When we say, Our Father, who art in heaven, what we are saying is, God, you're in heaven and I'm not. God, you are great and I'm not. God, you know everything and I don't. God, you are all-powerful and I don't. God, you are pure and holy and I am not. God, you bail me out when I need you the most. We admit that. That's what that first line in the prayer says, is that we are humble and you are great. That's the beginning of the Lord's Prayer. And that attitude and that approach of humility just follows every line in the Lord's Prayer, including the line that we are looking at today, and when we ask, forgive us our debts. And by praying that prayer, God, forgive us our debts, is one of the truest and most vulnerable expressions of humility. What we are saying in that moment is, God, I'm weak. God, I am broken. God, given to my own devices, I offend people. God, given to my own devices, I will choose pride and selfishness over humility. And we just express that to God in that way. Really, in our culture, we have two general worldviews or approaches to life. The first one is a humanistic worldview, which is, hey, there's nothing wrong with me. I don't owe any debts. I can do what I want and be what I want. I'm okay, you're okay. There's no debts here. There's no morality. There's no weakness in me. I'm the master of my own fate. And then there's Christianity, which is the diametrically opposed worldview to that, which is, you know what? I am lost on my own. I've got nothing on my own. I can't do it on my own. So our whole faith, the whole Christian faith, is based on humility. What God responds to in us, what we can do for Him, what we can accomplish for Him, the one thing that God responds to in us is humility. And where He finds humility, He pours out His mercy. So humility is so critical to what we pray in the Lord's Prayer. And that's why it's important for us to understand that humility births mercy, whereas pride births judgment. See, when we express mercy to one another, when I express mercy to Tana for hitting me upside the head, which was completely uncalled for, I don't know why she did that to me, but when I show Tana mercy, when I'm humble and I say to myself, wait a second, you know what? How many times have I hit other people? How many times have I offended other people? And in my own humility, when I realized the gloves were on the other hand, the gloves were on my hand, I've been the one who's hurt other people. And when in my humility I embrace my own weakness, then all of a sudden I have mercy on Tana for what she did. And it works that way in our relationship with God. When I come to God and I humbly say, God, forgive me of my debts, what that humility allows is it allows God to pour out His mercy. And so humility births mercy in our relationships with our one another and our relationships with God. But the other way is just as true. If in my pride I look at what Tana did and I say, I never would have done that. I've never done that. And I think somehow that I am more holy than Tana and I haven't sinned in the same way or I haven't sinned as bad, then all of a sudden that pride will cause me to judge Tana. And in the same way, in my relationship with God, if I come to God and in my pride, I am blinded to my own weakness, and I say, I don't need you, God, and I don't need mercy, then what that pride causes me to do is it causes me to stand in a place of judgment and not mercy. So humility births mercy, and so that's why we need to begin the Lord's Prayer, particularly verse 6, with this real poignant idea, this poignant grasp of the humility that we need. And it's in that humility that we really allow the Lord's Prayer to permeate us and to do inside of us what it needs to do. So as I said, we're just going to answer 2 quick questions today. Why we need mercy and why we need to show mercy. When it comes to why we need mercy, you need to understand is in life, right? In life, there's nothing better than having a guy. You know what I mean? I've got a guy. I love great deals. I live for the deal. That's me. If you know me, I live for it. Unless I have a coupon, I'm not doing it, all right? So that's how I live. And there's nothing better when it comes to finding good deals than having a guy. But not all guys are made equal, right, women? Can I get an amen? Not all of us guys are made equal. There are some guys that are far better than others. So sometimes you have a guy, but really what it is, it's a borrowed guy. It's like an acquaintance, a borrowed acquaintance. You know, if I said to somebody, oh yeah, I know somebody who works there, give him my name. And you go in and I go, hey, I know this guy. That's not a great deal. You might get 10 or 15% off because you know a guy who knows a guy, but that's not a great deal. The type of guy you really want is the type of guy that you've bailed out of jail or buried a body with. One of those 2 things. If you've got a guy that you buried a body with, that's your guy. That's the type of guy that says, hey, don't worry about it. I got you covered. You don't have to pay for this. I'll give you a great deal. And when it comes to needing mercy, what the Lord Prayer tells us is that we've got a guy. We've got a guy who gives us a deal on mercy. And that's what the Lord Prayer teaches us. It teaches us this, that mercy is actually a relational transaction with God. Mercy is something that happens not because we deserve it, not because we've earned it, not because we can afford it, but mercy happens because we know a guy, because we know Jesus Christ and we have a relationship with him. And the flip side of that coin is just as true, that without the relationship, there is no mercy. And what you have with judgment is a non-relational transaction with God. Judgment happens when you don't have a relationship with God. Do you remember when Jesus was talking to a group of people and they were saying, hey, we did this and we did that and we did all of these things for you? And do you remember why Jesus withheld and told them to depart from me? You know what the basis of that was? He said, depart from me, I never knew you. And what he was saying, we don't have a relationship. When you needed me to be your guy, you didn't want me to be your guy. And now at a time when you need mercy, I don't know you. We don't have that type of relationship. And you see this all the way back to the Garden of Eden. What a beautiful picture of mercy in the Garden of Eden. Never had there been anyone who had a guy like Adam and Eve did. Adam and Eve knew God so well. They were so tight with God that they walked around the Garden of Eden naked. They walked around the Garden of Eden with so much mercy that the bad didn't exist. Sin didn't exist. That's how much mercy was there. And the minute they left the Garden of Eden, all of a sudden, they didn't have a guy anymore. And here's the best way to summarize the whole Old Testament. It's people needing mercy but not having a guy. Not having a guy who could give them a deal on mercy. And as you read through Leviticus and you read through all of the Old Testament where they list all of these sin offerings and all of the procedures that they had to do and this whole religious structure that they had to keep afloat, you know what people were doing is they were paying the high price for mercy. They just had to keep doing all of these things to get mercy. They had to keep making all of these sacrifices for mercy. And why did Jesus Christ come? Because Jesus Christ wanted to be our guy. Jesus Christ said, this is it. I want to be your guy. And what Jesus Christ did is he restored that relationship. He restored mercy being a relational transaction. I think we've actually made a theological error in identifying judgment as a character quality of God. I don't believe that within the heart of God, judgment exists. I think where we see judgment is where God doesn't have a relationship, where people have rejected God. God wanted to be their guy. God wanted to have that relationship with them. So judgment isn't something that comes out of God. It's not a characteristic of God. It's the absence of God. Listen to what Psalm 108 verse 3 says. The Lord is full of compassion and gracious, slow to anger, and plenteous in mercy. I just want you to think about that. He is plenteous in mercy. He has more mercy than he knows what to do with. So how can a God who has more mercy than he knows what to do with withhold that? It's only because of relationship. That's the only requirement for mercy, is to have a relationship with me. That's a beautiful thing about God. Understand this, that judgment is not part of God's character. If you're in relationship with God, it's a done deal. You're receiving mercy, as much mercy as you will ever need. Now, earlier I said that our life is often interrupted, inconvenienced, and impacted by the offenses of others. And most of you nodded in agreement, and when I said that, you probably thought of all of the people in your life that annoy you and inconvenience you and offend you. But what's important for us to understand is that throughout churches in Wayne Township and in Hendricks County, there are good Christian people who are sitting there hearing a message very similar to this, and they are thinking of the people who annoy them and offend them. And do you know who those people are? It's us. You and I annoy and offend people just as much as people annoy and offend us. The reality is that we are the ones who cause that pain in people's lives with our selfishness, with our impatience, with our pride, with our demands, with our criticalness, with our judgment. We do that. And that's why you and I need mercy. It's because you and I are the ones, we're the perpetrators of pain in other people's lives. That's hard to swallow, right? That's hard to accept. I know as I stand before you today that in my life growing up, I grew up in a home where we didn't have a lot. And I grew up also in a home where the philosophy that I lived with was go out and get what you need, no matter what it takes, no matter what it costs, no matter who's hurt or offended by it. Just go out and get it. The ends justifies the means if the ends is you get what you want. And so if you grow up in that philosophy and you see your parents living that way, then you begin to be hardwired that way. And now some 35, 40 years removed from my formative years in my life, the honest truth is I'm still hardwired that way in some places in my life. And yeah, over the years, I've got better at masking that and making that look better, but the reality is that I'm still selfish. The reality is that I still tend to think of myself before everyone else. The reality is that the first thing that comes to my mind is what I want out of a situation, and that's there. And sometimes that's subtle. Sometimes it's only me and God that knows that I'm wrestling with that inside. And sometimes it's not so subtle. And sometimes I am just a selfish jerk. That's the reality. And I have to embrace that. And in embracing that, I have to understand, man, I need mercy in my life. I desperately need mercy. And I need to get that mercy at the best price possible, because I can't afford an ounce of mercy, and I need a ton load of mercy in my life. I love what Paul said. Paul said this. He said, Jesus Christ came into the world to save sinners, of who I am the worst. What's interesting about Paul's statement there is that Paul was fully aware of all of the sins he had committed in the past. He was fully aware that the blood of Christians had been shed at his hand. He was fully aware of how he had resisted God in his life. And even after becoming a Christian, I think Paul was fully aware that his abrasive personality turned off people, that sometimes he got into conflicts and fight because he was stubborn, and that there were weaknesses in his life. And what's remarkable about this acknowledgement is that it's made without shame or guilt. It's as if he says, I owe a debt, but I don't have to pay that debt. And I think those who receive mercy are those who understand that we know our debt, but we don't owe our debt. That's what mercy does. Mercy is something that you get when you are humble enough to acknowledge and know that you owe a debt, but yet because you receive mercy, you don't owe it anymore. And each and every one of us in the room today needs to be in that place where we know that we owe a debt, but we receive mercy so that we don't actually owe that debt anymore. And so when we pray that prayer, Father, forgive us of our deeds, forgive us of our debts, what we're asking and what we're saying to God is, God, I need a guy. I need you. I need a guy to sell me mercy. I need a God to give me mercy at a price I can afford, because I can't afford mercy. And I don't want to go without mercy in my life. I don't want to carry the debt of my selfishness. Selfishness is one area of my life. I could spend the next 2 hours, which would probably be interesting, but I could spend the next 2 hours telling you of all the other reasons I need mercy. Selfishness is one small area that I need mercy for. And so humility is saying, God, I need more mercy than I can ever afford. Will you give that to me? And we have to be humble enough to recognize how much mercy we need. What's interesting is the more humble we are, the more we are willing to accept that I am the chief of sinners, the more mercy comes. Isn't it interesting? It's kind of paradoxical. The better we try to make ourselves, the more we argue in our defense, the less mercy we get. The more we come to the table and go, I did it, I'm guilty, I'm the guy you're looking for, I'm the one, yeah, I did it all. The more we do that, the quicker we do that, God, oh, I got more grace for you. So I want to encourage you to humbly acknowledge your need for mercy, because the more you humbly acknowledge that, the more mercy that you receive. Don't ever be afraid. That's why the Bible tells us there is no condemnation for those who are in Christ Jesus. There's no condemnation in acknowledging that you need mercy, because it's paid for. It's there available for you. So embrace your need for mercy, because if you embrace your need for mercy, you'll be able to show mercy to others more easily. And that kind of leads to the second question, is why do we need to show mercy? Now, Economics 101 tells us that capitalism, by definition, is the freedom to build, design, make, offer a service at the lowest cost available to you for the highest price possible, right? That's capitalism. Capitalism allows you to drive your costs down, even if it means buying from China, even if it means lowering the quality of your product. Drive your price down, and then you can ask for however much you want. You can charge for however much you want. And that's a great economical system compared to a lot of other economical systems. It really motivates people. It's a great system, but it's not a biblical system. It's not God's system. And it's particularly not consistent with the economic system in which God deals with mercy. And here's how God deals economically with mercy. It's a great system. Here's what God says. Tell you what, I'm going to enter a deal. We're going to sign a contract. Here's a contract. I am going to sell you all the mercy that you need for free. I'm going to charge you a penny on one condition. Don't ever charge anyone a penny more than what I charged you. You want for free? Give it away for free. Don't charge a penny more for mercy, for grace, for forgiveness of other people than what I have charged you. And what happens is when we don't forgive other people, and when we are bitter and we hold on to that anger, what we're doing in essence is we are saying to that person, you're going to have to pay more for mercy than what I paid. You're going to have to pay a higher price. And when we pass judgment on people, what we are saying to people when we judge their actions and their attitudes and their behavior, what we are saying is, I am going to charge you more for grace than what I was charged. Whereas God gave me grace for free, I'm not going to give you grace until you meet my expectations. Whereas God forgave me without me having to earn or do anything, I'm going to require you to grovel. I'm going to require you to apologize. I'm going to require you to prove to me that you are worthy of my forgiveness, because somehow the mercy that God gave me for free is now going to cost you more. And that's what unforgiveness is. And so, whenever we monopolize mercy in our relationships, we violate the covenant of mercy. You hear what I'm saying? Whenever we monopolize mercy, we say, this mercy is all mine and I'm not giving it away. Whenever we do that, we violate the very essence of who God is. And we violate the very essence of this agreement that we've come to in God, which is free grace, free mercy, free love. We violate that. And in violating that, we put ourselves in a position where we don't receive the mercy and grace that we need. That's why Jesus in his prayer said, forgive us our debts as we also have forgiven our debtors. As we have done it to others, do it to us. Here's what God says. It's crazy. Crazy that he would say this. He says, you know what? I'm going to let you set the market price on mercy. You get to decide the going rate for mercy. Isn't that interesting? Rhonda, you get to decide in your life what the cost of mercy is going to be. Gene, you get to decide what the cost of mercy is going to be. Tana, you get to decide the cost of mercy. And here's how we're going to decide it. Whatever you charge others, I'll charge you. How's that for a deal? You want to give it away for free? I'll give it to you for free. You want to hold it back? It's going to be held back. That's what the Lord's Prayer tells us. It's a remarkable invitation. And so that's why we need to give it away for free. Let me end on a couple very practical applications of this. And the first one is this: always err on the side of mercy. When somebody offends you, when somebody hits you or injures you, when somebody steals from you, and somebody says something about you, always err on the side of mercy. You don't know what's going on in their life. You don't know how they've been hurt. I don't know how many people have hit Tana with big blow-up red boxing gloves. I don't know what she's reacting out of. Maybe it's a place of pain. Err on the side of mercy. Say, God, I don't know what's going on in Tana's life, but I know there's been times in my life where I haven't been at my best. So I don't know what's going on, so I'm going to err on the side of mercy. The other reason why we need to err on the side of mercy, we don't always know what God is doing in people's lives. I've actually been guilty of judging a person or judging what's going on in a person's life, and in retrospect discovered that I wasn't judging that person or their motives. I was actually judging the work of God. Later I realized, oh, God was doing something in their life. Oh, God was involved in all of that, and I spoke too soon. I spoke like I knew what the heck was going on, and I didn't, and I judged God because I spoke too early, because I didn't err on the side of mercy. So you don't know what's going on in people's life, and you don't know what God is doing in people's life. So just err on the side of mercy. You can't ever make a mistake with mercy. Just show mercy. Nowhere in the Bible do we find somebody standing before God and God chastising them and go, you know what? You showed way too much mercy. That's going to cost you. He never says that. Err on the side of mercy, because when we refuse to forgive people, what we are saying to people is that you don't deserve mercy as much as I do. And you're going to have to pay more for mercy than what I did. Second kind of practical application is plan for future purchases. You might be standing right now in a righteous place. You might be the good guy in the conflict. You might be the right guy in the conflict. But next week, the tables will turn, and you'll be the one who's wrong. You'll be the one who's not in the righteous place. And when the tables turn, you're going to need mercy. And so in this situation, even when you're right, even when you're the offended one, understand, you know what? I got an option here. I can withhold mercy because I have the right to do that because I'm right, or I can show mercy and make a future purchase. So that next week, when I'm standing in the wrong, when I'm the offender, and I need mercy, then mercy is going to be available to me. So always plan for future purchases of mercy. I find it interesting, just kind of through the normal course of life, that the more mature we get in life and the more mature that we get as Christians, we somehow forget how much mercy we needed at past points in our life. You know what I mean? Like for a lot of us who've been walking with the Lord for a while, we just don't sin as much as we used to. The older you get, you just don't have the energy to sin as often. I used to be able to sin, all day long and get up the next day and be able to do it all over again. I don't have the energy to do that anymore. And it's easy for us to go, you know what? And we look at younger Christians or younger people who are really racking up the mercy, and we go, wow, I can't believe them. I can't believe what they're doing. And we forget. We forget how much mercy we needed at different points in our life. So always remember just how much mercy you've needed in your life. And always remember just how much mercy you're going to need in your life. And here's the last point that I want to make. Understand this, that bitterness is far more expensive than mercy. This saying has been attributed to a lot of people. You've probably heard it, that resentment is like drinking poison and expecting the other person to die. I want to be honest with you this morning. Forgiveness sucks. Forgiveness is hard. Swallowing your pride is hard. being the first one to say sorry, being the one to say sorry when you're not really the one in the wrong, being the one who extends the olive branch when it was the other person who did the offending. That is not easy. And I got to be honest with you, I don't know if it's ever going to get easy, but at this age in my life, it hasn't got any easier. Saying sorry has not got any easier for me. I don't know if it will click one day, but I don't like doing it because it doesn't feel good. It's not a comfortable thing to do. But forgiveness and unforgiveness and bitterness is always more expensive. And as difficult as it is to forgive, the alternatives are much worse. See, because when we hold on to bitterness in our life, it costs us something. Your stress level and your anxiety level will go through the roof the more bitterness and unforgiveness you have in your life. The more you criticize and judge people, it will affect your well-being. It'll affect your physical well-being. It'll affect your emotional well-being. One of the things I love the most about God, being an emotional person that I am, I love the fact that God has created us as humans with a full emotional spectrum, right? It's a beautiful part of being a human. We can feel. Do you know what bitterness does? Bitterness numbs us to some of the best parts of the emotional spectrum. Bitterness numbs us from feeling joy. Bitterness numbs us from feeling contentment. Bitterness numbs us from feeling peace. Bitterness numbs us from feeling unity. All of the great parts of that emotional spectrum are robbed of us when we have bitterness in our heart. You've never met a truly bitter person who laughs a lot. Right? Bitter people don't laugh. Bitter people don't tell jokes. They just don't. Their emotional spectrum just gets smaller and smaller and smaller and more narrow until the only emotion that they can express is anger. And in doing that, when we hold unforgiveness and bitterness in our heart, it costs us even our relationship. And when you hold unforgiveness and bitterness, what it costs you is the relationships that matter the most to you. And so the people that you love in this moment end up paying the price for offenses that somebody committed in another moment. And so your spouse and your children and the people you go to church with and the people at work are paying a debt that they don't owe. Because you're holding on to bitterness from someone else, and you visit that bitterness upon all of these people. You transfer all of that bitterness and anger onto these people, and all of a sudden the people that you are around are getting cut and are getting hurt and getting offended, not because they deserve it, but because you're carrying this bitterness over, and you end up driving people away. You're mad and upset that you weren't loved, but because of your own bitterness, the people who want to love you can't love you. And it's going to cost you your relationships. Many marriages are in strife and end up in divorce, not because there's the issue between the two people, but it's because these two people didn't deal with the bitterness from the past, and they bring that bitterness in. It happens in the church as well. People come into the church, and all of a sudden everything's going great, and then there's a moment of conflict, and all of a sudden the floodgates open, and every other offense that has ever happened to them is now visited upon this situation. Don't ruin your present circumstances. Don't ruin your present relationships because of past bitterness. Most beautiful thing that we have in our life is our relationship with the Lord and our relationship with those around us who we love. Don't ruin that because you're holding on to bitterness and anger that other people have committed. It comes at far too great of a cost. And so, forgive, show mercy, show grace so that you'll have enriching, satisfying relationships that are free of the poison of past offenses and past hurts. And that's why we need to show mercy.